it comes down to that pale blue dot that we have gotten so fixated into our opinions that we don't have room for other people in it.
Barbara, welcome to the Oxford Talks podcast. How are you doing today?
I am great. I'm very excited to be here. It's been something that's been on the calendar for a while, and all the travels to ultimately get here. It's great.
For the folks who are listening and viewing as well, Barbara has traveled all the way from California to be with us.
Yes.
That is quite a journey.
Yes.
And I think our work and I think our association goes back since 2022, if I'm not wrong. I think that's
I
when
believe that's accurate.
22, 23, you joined Oxford Talks, and I think we spent quite a lot of time, and we ended up doing the Oxford Talks. It happened I think last year. I think early last year we did it.
I think it was September 2023, if I recall correctly. So about
Oh,
2 years ago.
oh wow, that's amazing. And since we've kept in touch, and I can't believe that the podcast audience has grown that much that people are from California coming on. So I was really excited. But folks, for the folks who don't know much about you, what is it that you do? What is your day-to-day job?
If I were to break it down into a type or category, I'm a clinical psychologist, clinical hypnotherapist, and I do some life coaching in there. So people don't tend to get one thing from me, they get all things from me because it's really hard to separate those out. But ultimately, I believe that people get disconnected often from who they authentically are. And my purpose, my mission, my passion is to help restore that authenticity within people. And it's not just a clear cut, okay, do this and you find your way. It's really an unlayering and an uncovering of discovering the parts where you've gone against yourself and the parts where you're actually for yourself and the parts that feel right to you and the parts that don't feel right to you. So it's a sorting process so that it helps people discover that truth that's always been within them that just slowly often they have moved away from over time.
Speaking about discovering themselves, I remember your dad was a huge part of your life.
Yes.
How did he help you? And I'm remembering the conversations we had while we were preparing for the talk, how he helped you discovered a lot in life. Can you share a story?
Sure. So it's actually a quite complicated story. Leading back, if I go back into my dad's history, my dad was born right around the Great Depression in the United States. And his father passed away and left five living children without a father, without any income. So my grandmother had to release all the children to an orphanage. And so at 6 years old, my dad had to go to a different state and live in an orphanage. And he lived there until he was 17. And although when I had told him once that I felt very bad for him that he had to grow up there, he said, "Oh, don't feel bad for me. I had 1,200 brothers and sisters." So he found some optimism in it. However, the start of his life was during the Great Depression. He lost his father. He effectively lost his mother because he only got to see her once a year. Then he goes to an orphanage, and then at 17, he takes a train to the depot where they're registering people for World War II, and he signs up at 17. So then he joins World War II. By 19, he's up and flying in World War II. He flew World War II, Korea, Vietnam. So if you can hear, his whole story is trauma, and it's war, and it's the fight within. And so my dad went on that way, and when he was 41, he retired after 24 years in the US Navy. And when he retired, he took a insurance sales job, did very well, but it had no purpose in it for him. And he had a mental breakdown. And as a result of that mental breakdown, he had gone back to parts of the Far East, and for 4.5 years, he left our family and no contact. He left and he went and sat in monasteries and ashrams, and he went on a very deep internal spiritual quest to reclaim himself. And he came back when I was about 6 years old. And of course, it was quite devastating because leaving your family and my mother with four children, and during a time of life where at least in the United States, women weren't working a lot, and so there was often the father in the home that would help guide and direct things. And so we had a lot of internal chaos happening in the home too. And when my father came back, he came back a man of peace. So he left a man of war and he came back a man of peace. I've always said if I wrote a book about him, it would be that man of war, man of peace.
Do you think a war does that to people?
Oh, it definitely does.
Mm.
The what it does, I've worked with many, many military veterans, both active duty and those that have retired, and the level of mind that they have to get to do some of the actions that they have to do in the military, it really is removing the self from the equation, because if they stop to think about what they're doing or to have an emotion about what they're doing, most people wouldn't be able to do it.
Mm.
And so it's the after effect. We have a lot of our veterans that are very mentally challenged, and haven't received the support that they need to be able to sort back through everything that happened and process how they were affected. And as a result, the way that they operate their lives are acting out that trauma over and over. And so the incidence rates of spousal abuse, child abuse, alcoholism, drug abuse, homelessness, they're
Suicide as well, yeah.
suicide,
It's a big one.
absolutely. It's estimated in the United States, I think it's one every 22 minutes or something like that is suiciding. I may be wrong on that.
We have to check the stat afterwards, but I think I read somewhere that more people have died, men especially, in suicide, especially veterans, than they died in combat.
Yes.
And I think the illnesses are, there's a huge spectrum of illnesses as well that they've gone through. So it's really is, going back to your father, do you remember him telling you how he found his peace?
No. So the interesting part about living with my father, so I was 6 years old when he came back. My siblings were all much older than I was, 8, 10, and 13 years older, so they were impacted differently than I was. And the way that I look at my life with my dad was I learned spiritually first. So it was more the connection with all those esoteric questions. And I remember I would ask him a lot of, but why? But why? I don't understand. And he would always say, and one day you will, which has proved to be true, but it's not been easy. But I didn't really learn the mental fortitude, and I didn't learn the emotional fortitude, and I didn't know how to really even ground myself in my physical body into a world where my friends were playing sports or doing other things. I was so much up in that spiritual realm that I was very lost. I was very confused. So it was now it is a benefit that my dad brought that spirituality to me, but then I needed more groundedness in all areas of my life to be able to process through mentally and emotionally and physically. And I think that was happening, but then my dad died. And so when he passed away, I was 26. I didn't have that resource to go back to ask all my questions and to understand how to navigate the challenges that I was going through in life. So it came as a mixed bag. There were
Mm.
some really beautiful ways that he gave me gifts and helped me open to my own gift inside. But there were also a lot of ways that I was very lost and confused. It's all come together now, so I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that before I left this beautiful planet that I was able to integrate.
Do you reckon that, do you still have that desire that maybe if there was a medium of asking him some questions now, if you were given that option today, right now, would you take it, or do you think you got everything you needed?
Oh, no, I would definitely take it.
Yeah.
I would love to sit down with any wise person and have a conversation because I think the foolishness we have as humans is the old saying, the more the more you know there is to know, but there's also the fool believes he knows it all and the wise man knows he doesn't. And so I would rather err on that side of being wise in knowing that I don't know it all
Yeah.
and to ask questions and to learn because I personally have experienced that the more that I explore how my mind works and the way I think about things, the more opens up. And it's nothing that you can write, it's nothing that you can describe, it's an experience. And it opens to a place of even greater curiosity, but also a more sense of peace and not knowing, if that makes sense. Whereas when I was first on my journey, it was wanting to know. I need to know why, why?
Mm.
And now it's more of a place of surrender and acceptance. And so, in being in a place of not knowing, but having a deep amount of trust and faith within that there's a higher organization to life, not just humans. I saw in someone's backpack yesterday at the airport a pin that said, "In humans we trust." And I thought, that is a very foolish statement.
Wasn't it "In God We Trust"? Isn't that the popular one? Yeah.
Yes, and in the United States, that's on our money. In
Yeah,
God
yeah,
we
and yeah,
trust.
yeah.
And it's our foundation and our constitution and things. It's that when we believe we know it all and that we trust humans, we are fallible every which way we turn, and that's okay. It's more the acceptance of that and the surrendering that we don't know it all. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and I think it causes a lot of fear in people to say, "I don't know."
Tell me how you became a clinical psychologist. That's an interesting story as well.
Yes. So, when I was 13, I remember so clearly, my father was outside doing some yard work, and I was leaning out my bedroom window talking to him, and he said, "So, what do you think you wanna do when you grow up?" And I said, "I'm gonna be a clinical psychologist," like, in a way that doesn't everybody know that? And to me, it was just the right question. It was something that I already knew, and in part I knew because my dad was he was going through getting his PhD in psychology, but it wasn't anything that he really shared with me. But I saw him because he would work for a volunteer line, which was called Hotline for us. And hotline would be someone would call in a crisis. So it might be like a suicide line or something that someone calls in crisis and they have someone to talk to.
Yeah,
And back in the day, they would actually go to your home. So my dad would go to people's homes in the night and help, like with a domestic violence or something. They wouldn't just bring in the police, they would have people actually come and help you work it out. And so I knew that he did that, and something always felt right in my heart about that. And I remember when I was 5 years old and walking down the street and seeing someone homeless in Santa Barbara, and I walked up and I gave him a kiss on the cheek because I just had this sense that he was sad. And so those feelings, although I wouldn't do that the same way today, it was the innocence of those feelings of knowing that I could feel what other people were feeling, maybe not exactly as they were feeling it, but I had a connection to that, and I think we all do. And I also had a desire, though, to sort through my own pain when I got older, and I had a desire to help other people alleviate their pain. Because my real belief is that every baby born on on this planet is just a pure, innocent being. They
yes.
they don't have the environment, they don't have people, they don't have any level of thought about them yet to tell them anything other than they're pure and beautiful. And it's over time that we lose that, and that had happened for me. And when my dad had asked me that question, it just popped something back into life for me. And I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna be a clinical psychologist." But then by the time I was 16, my brother, who was 13 years older than I was, and he's since passed, God rest his soul, but he was Mensa level, which I don't know if that's worldwide, but in the US, it's like the top 10%, I think, of people who are high IQ, highly intelligent. And so he was very much about learning and academics and things, and he asked me, "Where do you wanna go to college?" And I said, "I'm too stupid to go to college." So somehow between my 13-year-old self and my 16-year-old self,
Hmm.
I lost that belief that from this confidence of, "I'm gonna be a psychologist," to, "I'm too stupid." And it wasn't academically, but it was internally that I believed I was too stupid for that. And so then life progressed, and when I was 26, my father passed away, and I had just this massive awakening inside of me. So, where I was disconnected, I then had an awakening. I've had more since, but that one just really kind of blew my mind open because this source that I had to go back to was no longer there, which meant somewhere on a deeper level, I knew I needed to go back to myself. And I think that on the planet, that is what we are all seeking, whether we're aware of it or not. It's a reconnection with that truth within, that pureness and that innocence from being that small child. And so when we were going through my father's things, I found some of his psychology books. And I went to my brother like a little lost girl, and I held a book toward him and I said, "I want to be a psychologist." And he said, "So 5 years from now, where are you going to be? You going to be with that degree or without that degree?" And that's all it took for me. It just clicked in my mind. And I think what makes this so much more impactful for me is at the time I was going through a divorce. I had married young, had 2 children, and I ended up losing my house, and my children and I were homeless. And I had this moment though of this is what I'm going to do. It wasn't, "Oh my gosh, how am I gonna do this?" There wasn't thinking involved in it. It was an inner knowing.
Yeah.
And that's where I had said at the beginning, we're helping people return to that authenticity. And if you recall, my Oxford talk was your greatest gift. It's
Yes.
that my father had said on the day we're born, we're all given this gift wrapped box laid at our feet that very, very few people will choose to open. And so the question was I going to open that gift for myself? But again, it wasn't a level of thinking. It wasn't a level of mind to say, "Oh, okay, so logically, here's how I could this or this." No, it was this inner calling inside of me. And so I started back taking one class and finding a small part-time job and basically scrambling my way through. But that vision never left me. That calling never left me. So I never left it.
How difficult was it? You are a young mother, single, two children, and college is not easy at all. And I think in America, you was it again for the financials are quite extensive that you have to I think pay for it, and you
Yes.
can get student loans. But again, in UK, there's a thing that you can keep on paying them for like a very long time, and it's okay. But in America, like it really is a big burden going to college. How was that? How was that time managing, juggling all these things at the same time?
Well, there was tremendous fear. Uh, the level of fear and anxiety I had inside my body was overwhelming.
Fear of losing any of it?
No, it was more the fear of survival. How was I going to pay for college? How was I going to pay for food? How was I going to get a car? Where was I
Mm.
going to live? And all these things. And I really can't explain Waleed because, again, it wasn't a logical, sensible process I was going through. It was an inner knowing. It was a deep, it wasn't even thinking, "Oh, I have faith this will turn out." It was an inner knowing that somehow it just kept guiding me. It was what I like to say, it's that whisper within that says, "Come along. Yes, you're headed in the right direction. No, that's not the direction for you." And we all have that. We have that sense whether we bury it or whether it's fully alive for us. It's in there and it's that thing that says, you know this isn't right for you, even if you're going to do it, you know it's not right for you. Or,
Mhm.
yes, this is right for you. And nobody else can really tell us whether something is right or wrong for us. We know on the inside. And so somehow that inner knowing just kept whispering to me, "Come along, come along." And meanwhile, I just was overwhelmed with fear and a lot of depression too. And um, periodic suicidality.
A clinical psychologist in training went into depression.
Oh, yes. I went through a cycle of anxiety, depression, and suicidality, and nobody was really aware of it because I was really good at putting on the outer face that
That's a lot of us, isn't it?
oh, sure.
Like a lot of people are. There are instances, not personal but anecdotal, that friends and of friends. When I was living in back in Oxford, and a couple of young guys committed suicide then.
Mm,
And I came, and again, it's like it's not my immediate friends at all, but I heard their stories, and it literally was like that. On a Friday, they said hello to everyone, they said goodbye to everyone. It was great fun, and oh yeah, next weekend we should do this, 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 and haven't come to work on Monday. Tuesday's gone. Wednesday, people are really worried. Next Friday, they're found dead.
it's tragic.
It and it's so and it's just so bizarre. And I think it's like when you get old and when you get sick or something, and I think your loved ones or the people who are really close to you, I think it brings a bit of a closure to a life. um because you always think, like, if you're someone very close to you is about to die or anything, like they don't have a lot, you tend to be close to them, and you ask them questions and everything was okay in life and everything. And I think if someone is at peace at that point in time, it brings peace to you to go about your life back into it peacefully.
Yes.
But when suddenly something jolts out of it, like an accident happens or suicide, I think for the people who are close to you, and it's the Keanu Reeves quote. I don't know if you remember. It's a very famous one. I think Stephen Colbert asked him, Keanu, what happens when we die? And he's like, I think the people who love us will miss us. And I think that is so surely is true, that again, that person is gone, but the unclosure of things for the family and friends, it creates, sometime it can create trauma for them that can just, they could just never come out of it. And I think, again, you can, again, as you're saying, you can go about life just hiding it behind a mask, and suddenly a trigger event would happen. It would just
Yes.
come flushing out of the gates.
Yes. Yes. And I think in so many ways in our lives, whether we go back to the days where we were really in survival mode. I mean, when I imagine all the modern conveniences that we have aren't here
Yeah,
and having to figure out how you're going to find food for the day or shelter for the day, which happens now in our homeless population, and a lot of people that are on the fringe or the margin there financially. But the level of survivalists that we had to live by back in the day, we probably didn't have a lot of time for emotion.
yeah,
And so I really see life as we started out as doers. If we were the cave people, we had to learn how to do things for our survival. Then we became the thinkers. And we could start thinking about the ways our brain developed enough that we could think through resources and ways to develop so that we could have an easier way of being. Not easy, but easier.
yeah,
And then now I feel like we've moved into the age of feeling. So a lot of people, their traumas are coming up and I can't explain why. However, my sense of it is that generationally, and when I say generationally, I don't mean 2, 3 generations back, I mean 10,000 generations back. That if we go back to those survivalists who then had children, and then had more children, and on and on and on to present day, generationally, collectively, not just my family or your family, but collectively as humans, we've gone through so many traumas
yeah,
that have been passed down through stories, through songs, through the way that we think, through the way that we feel, through the way that we act.
yeah,
And so those traumas then now in this time, and maybe it's because we do have more modern conveniences that we're not worrying about how we're going to forage for food or find shelter, that we have more opportunity to actually feel and express. And in that, the awakening and the opening that's happened is really without direction for a lot of people. It just breaks open, and now there is, we like to say, they're a hot mess. There's
Yeah.
this level of emotion that's spilling out all over the place, and that trauma, whether it's the trauma that ultimately leads someone to suicide, or it's the trauma that leads someone to such a great awakening that they break through and discover what's always been within, the good, the bad, and the ugly, everything, because it has to be faced. Like the yin yang symbol, there's that light
Yeah.
with the spot of darkness and the darkness with the spot of light. We have to face our shadow side, we have to face our light side, and integrate all that.
What do you think? Do you think it really got exacerbated in the last, let's say, 15, 20 years when I went from, of course, I'm not that old, but I went from, as metaphorically speaking, I went from knowing how my neighbors or how my street is doing versus the streets of all the world. I can immediately press a button and know what that person is doing. I think, from a, let's say, clinical psychology perspective, human brain was never designed to
No.
know how 7 billion people are up to at the moment.
Yes, I agree with that. And the level of information coming in all the time, and the type of information that's coming in has really numbed people out a lot
Mm.
to what they're feeling, to what they're experiencing, to where they can go from something catastrophic to something laughable all in 30 seconds. And that they can switch those emotions so quickly says to me that there's really a lack of groundedness in there. That there's a level of disconnection
Mhm.
happening that's happened through all these modern conveniences.
Do you think it's good to be in a tough spot in life?
Absolutely. I think someone
Barbara, what way would you draw the line that two, because I'm going back to you in college, two kids doing all of that. Again, you're again, as you said, in a time where you just didn't have time for emotions. It was just pure, no logic. Logic doesn't even come to your mind. It's
no.
just pure passion, pure, I just need to go through this. And you become hyper focused and everything is just gets blurred out.
Yes.
How long people, I mean, where where would you place someone who's constantly in that and suddenly you decide to give up? It's a healthy level of strain versus, but again, there's no such thing as healthy level of strain. It's like when strain comes to you, I don't know, suddenly your loved one is, again, maybe, I don't know, they are involved in a car accident or something, so terrible has happened. There's no, you just have to respond to that, right? There's no like, okay, I'm not gonna go to the funeral, maybe because I'm just gonna restrain my this. That's not how life is, isn't it?
It can be so overwhelming, and I think about, even with myself, the level of experience that I've been through and also the level of resilience that I've had, that there's some things in life I couldn't ever imagine being able to handle. And I hope and pray that never happens to me, some of the atrocities that happen on the planet. I don't know how I would handle it. So I don't think anybody can say, oh, here's the breaking point for everyone. We look at throughout the history of humans what's happened and how some have survived and how some haven't. And I think one of the greatest, probably the greatest book I've ever read was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor
Victor Frank,
Frankl,
yeah.
because he actually live in vivo studied the breaking point of people, what gave them the will to survive the concentration camps and what didn't. And that's what he wrote about all through that, and then came up with his logotherapy that he continued on after he was released from a concentration camp. Um,
I was
but
in. Sorry, please go
I
on.
was just gonna say, I think it's one of the most in-depth, real,
Yeah,
experiences, because it's not a hypothesis out here and looking in. He was living it with the other people.
I was. I think I might have shared this on the pod before, maybe personally to someone, but I've been to the concentration camp in Poland. It's just, I think I'll show you pictures of from that place. I don't think so. It's appropriate here. I'll show you after on my phone. But I they did like now because it's like a historical site. The Auschwitz camp. They do guided tours and everything. And I literally went from um, they had the three spots where the movie Schindler's List,
Yes.
Schindler's Factory,
Mm.
the place where the train used to arrive, and the actual concentration camp. They're slightly far apart from each other. But there's like a whole route you go and go through like a whole tour in just one day, and I did that, and because it's really really preserved, Barbara, your eyes see it, especially the camp, but your just mind cannot believe what it's saying,
Yes.
and it's less than 100 years ago that thing is there.
Yes.
And it's very, for me, as from a historical study perspective, it's really interesting to see that when war was going on, you wouldn't even like know about these things. During the war, there was no mention of concentration camps. It was just purely like war and this and all of that. It's when the war ended, people suddenly discovered these things, and then I think it was the U.S. Army general who came around, and I think that's what was a huge kind of a motivation to build kind of a cinema around that world as well. That's why you see a lot of movies being made about that, because he said like, oh, we need to fund these projects, like the world needs to hear what exactly happened, like the atrocities. And this is what just was the aftermath, like
Yes.
we saw what happened during, which never got recorded, is just another level.
Yes.
So I think the concentration camps, I mean, I'm not gonna go too much in detail, but I mean, Viktor Frankl's, that's why you're very right. I think one of the most profound pieces of literature human has ever written for any other human. Because I saw the visuals of it, that Barbara, like there, it's a massive, massive room, and it's just full of shoes, and there's just stacks and I mean, when you say a stack, and then there's a stack of like, you can't, if you throw a shoe in there, good luck finding it again.
Yeah.
That kind of a stack. It's just shoes and shoes and shoes. You go to the next room, it's just glasses, glasses. It's tons of. They were like, if you the moment you jump off the train, they'll just take off your glasses because they're like, reading is not for you or whatever. And I had LASIK surgery earlier this year, but all my life I used to wear glasses. And I just remember like it was such an integral part of who I am that I would just personally feel, I've never had to happen, but even let's say when you're playing sports or something and suddenly you knock off your glasses, for that specific moment you feel like a bit like violated, because like you feel like, oh, someone has taken your vision away from you. Even like imagine like if I just come right now and put my hand right on top of your eyes, like you can't see, your body will just immediately be in a state of
Yes.
shock.
Yeah.
Imagine you are on a train and you suddenly jumped off and someone had just snatched your glasses from you. And that's everyone who came with the glasses. There's the next room where it's just full of hair of women. They're like no long hair, just cut it everything short. And I think again, there's just no telling of like how brutal we have been to each other.
Yes. And
And I
we
think,
still are.
yeah, and from there to now, my TikTok feed is not loading properly. That's something. And that's why I really, really urge people. I don't mean to say you have to go to Auschwitz or anything like that, but I think remnants of who we were and where we come from, they are all over the world, in every country, in every city. We are here in London. I mean, as I was telling you, this building 20, 30 years ago used to be a workshop for garages and stuff. You can't even see a single bus around here at the
Mhm.
moment.
Mhm.
It's
History is important
very important, yes.
for so many reasons. And to your point about TikTok versus Auschwitz, we can get lost in this false world.
Yeah.
And as it said, we create everything that we're really thinking and believing anyhow, because we all have our own perception and then we project it out there. So you and I could both look at the same thing and have a very different reaction to it. But again, it's looking to me at more the totality of the darkness and the light in it. And I
Mm.
think if we look at anything in life, we have to look at those counterparts. We can't just look at one side of it. And there's so many places we could go with this, but even going back to the suicidality, these kids that are feeling like they need to suicide because someone's telling them that they're worthless and they're ugly, and so take your life, and then they do. That level of disconnect from within is so profound, and I think there's so many barriers that have gotten in the way of that connection with self, unless a child has been raised in a school or an environment or a sports team or whatever that's really about. No, you need to come back and you need to know who you are, and you need to know that there's some parts of you that's going to get angry that you've lost
Mhm.
that tournament, and there's other parts of you that can still be okay even though you lost that tournament. It's the holding of both at the same time that I think we've really moved away from, and with the atrocities that have happened throughout humanity, but particularly to your topic there of Auschwitz, is that people were so disconnected from that place within, perhaps to the point of saying, well, what if this was my mother? What if this was
Yeah.
my child? That as long as it's not happening to me, we're okay. And we've seen that also through the history of humans too, that once it happens to someone, that's when they tend to have a change of mind or a change of heart. Not always, but it often happens that way. And years ago, I traveled and I was at Dachau in Germany. And one of the most profound things that I saw there amongst everything that I saw, and I don't know about you, but I felt so heavy walking through there. I cried my eyes out. It was so just unbelievable, really. And I think that's where our brain goes is, oh, I can't even believe that's happening. That can't be
Yeah.
happening. And it's that inner protection from having to feel those deeper feelings of, oh my gosh, this is happening and I'm not doing something about it. But when I saw this one image, and it was in a video that they were showing, and this image was they opened a door to this room that was just piled with skeletons of people. They had their skin on their skeleton, but that's it. You could see every bone in that stack of humans that were laying there, and the people that were viewing it, and their face aghast, like wearing fur coats, these beautiful hats, these nice suits and long coats, and they're standing there because they lived about a mile or 2 away, and these things were happening, so the contrast, that's what struck me so much, was the contrast of these people whose lives had been literally stripped from them moment by moment, and these people who were over here having the high life. And seeing that right next to each other in that image was so profound for me, it's, like, burned into my brain. And with where we're at as a humanity, I don't see things much different. We've been able to disconnect ourselves, whether it's through this thing in our hand, right? Which again, it has its plus and its minus. It has the light and the darkness. The light of it is, wow, I wanted to get here to find you. Wow, that map, great, here I am. But the dark part is I can get so lost into that world and only see what I want to see, and that it's actually designed to help you only see what you wanna see and to feed that, that we can lose sight of the bigger essence of life. We forget to look up, we forget to go out, we forget to connect, and the greatest disconnection, in my humble opinion, is the disconnection from self, because when we disconnect from ourselves, we can't be connected to someone else, and that's what trauma does. That's what happened to me. I was so disconnected from that truth within myself through that beautiful little girl that I was. I have pictures of myself when I was this little girl and she was so sweet. I love her so much. And that was actually part of what helped me start coming back to myself. And I tell every person who comes into my office once we get moving in particular direction as I say, do you have a picture of yourself? We identify an age where they really felt disconnected from themselves. Like it could have been the family dog died. It could have been they moved to a new school. It could have been their parents were always fighting. Whatever it was, it could have been personal trauma to them. But we look at how their present day behaviors and thoughts and feelings and the ways that they act out in the world are representative of this part that never got closure. So as you're talking about someone dying prematurely, that lack of closure, whereas it's someone elderly, we can make more sense of it. We can find closure with that. So I always say we have these open loops that just keep running and they're looking to be mastered. They're looking for something or someone to come in and say, "Oh, let me help you put all the pieces together to integrate it so you can have mastery over that and move on from it." And so when we go back and we find these ages, and for me in particular, it was um, about a year and a half, but I don't have a picture of myself at a year and a half, so I couldn't put her out. But also at 5 years old, and then at 9 years old, and about 12 years old. And once I identified those and I went and found pictures of myself like that, and I can look at her and I can, even though it's me, I can see her somewhat separate from me in having to go through so many of these experiences and not having anyone there to help her understand what was happening, no one to help close the loop, no one to help process those feelings. So those carried along.
Yeah.
And up into my adult life, that's what started breaking open. And all the fear that I had as a child came bounding back. All the sadness I had came bounding back. And even that sense of a child of, I don't want to be here. This hurts too much. I want to leave. That came bounding back in suicidality. And so those open loops, I think, are more prevalent on this planet right now. And maybe it's because we have close to 8 billion people on it that it's just more noticeable, or maybe it's because we have more access to media that we can see it. But there's so much pain and suffering happening. And then that perception that it's because of this out here in the world, we project it out, where the answer and the resolution is within.
Yeah. I've got two questions coming into my head. Number one would be, is the kind of the historical perspective. What would you say? And the question is around nurtures versus nature. That for someone who, regardless of age, they are finding themselves in a difficulty, uh, finding difficulty in finding who they are. They've lost that sense of self, and then the day to day life is just a strain. And begin again, when you don't have a vision of life or where do you want to head, directionless, you can go in any direction, and again, it brings that kind of a strain into your head. What does one have to do, or what initiative one has to take? What's the first step in the direction of finding oneself?
The ability to withstand what you're going to learn about yourself. That knowing that you can face that pain, whatever it is, and walk out the other side. And so many people that come to my practice are terrified of discovering what they're going to find inside themselves. And what I remind people is you've already lived through it.
Wait,
It's
wait, wait. This is really profound. So I'm lost as a person myself, and I want to find myself. And the first step is to acknowledge the fact that whatever is going to be there about myself, I'm going to be okay.
you're going to be okay.
Oh wow, that is profound. You think that's that's the
I
heart?
do,
Okay.
because why would you go in and open all that up only to know that you're not going to be okay? That you're just gonna open up these gaping wounds and you're gonna discover things about yourself that are gonna hurt even more, but it's not going to heal. So I tell
Oh wow.
people, when I was 16, I wiped out on a moped, a little motor scooter, and I tore up like my arm and my face and things. And I remember the doctor came with this scrub brush, and I'm looking at my arm with all these rocks in it. And "You're not doing that, are you?" And he said, "Yes, we have to get all the rocks out of there or you'll get infected and then it won't heal properly." So I had to have the short-term pain for the long-term gain of healing. And so often people want that short-term gain of avoiding the feeling, but the
Oh,
pain is long-term. And
that's
so I
typical
use that
human. Yeah.
analogy with people that short term, I'm not telling you this is going to be easier without pain. I'm telling you that long term, if you keep going through the process, you're going to process these things, these open loops, so that they're not open anymore. your brain is going to make more sense of it. Your nervous system is going to recalibrate itself. It's going to reorganize the way you're thinking, the way that you're feeling, so that the nervous system isn't just having this automatic response to an old way of living, because essentially we're living in our past. We're not living now. And so when people are saying, yeah, but this happened or that happened, they're in yesterday or yesteryear. They're not right now. What they're saying is, I'm living it still today. And there's a way out of that. And so the healing process starts with saying, I'm willing to do this. I've literally had people where we've begun the process that have said, I'm not willing to do this. I'm not willing to do this.
It's too painful.
It's too painful. And most times they end up staying because I remind them this short term pain is already what you're living with long term. You've been living it for days, weeks, months, and years. And when you're tired enough of living that way, you're seeking a different way to do it. And it's such a humbling process, Waleed, to sit in the presence of someone who is bearing their soul open, not just to me, but to themselves. That they're willing to look inside and find all those pains. But what they realize, at least through the process I take them through, is that it's not this adult that's carrying that. It's these younger parts of themselves that are still carrying it. And when they start to see that, wow, there's different parts of me in there, and that there's this 5-year-old who I'm still expecting to be able to handle this level of emotion that they couldn't handle then. And then they have to keep reliving it. And I say, do you want that 5-year-old to, now that you're aware of that, to have to perpetually go through that pain? No, I don't know how to do it, is always the statement that comes back, but I don't know how. And I say, I do. So
Mm.
I'm going to take you through a process piece by piece, and we unlayer. In the first 3 sessions I do with people, they unlayer so much about themselves that they didn't even know by specific questions that I ask them. And they start to say, "Oh, I'm starting to understand. I'm starting to get it, but how do we fix it?" And so that part, what I also say is we don't need to fix something because you're not broken. We just need to help your brain see it differently, because the impact that was happening to you, you didn't have this part of the brain to be able to say, oh, let me process through why this is happening this way. Oh, this had nothing to do with me, had all to do with my parents. We didn't have that level of that. All we had was a feeling inside that said something is off. Something is not right here. And I don't know what it is. I can't identify it, but something knows it's not right. And so then that pain carries. Then the nervous system says, okay, pay attention to anything that looks like that because it doesn't turn out well. But that's a really underdeveloped way of processing life as adults,
Mm.
is to just keep reacting to it. And we have a lot of that happening on the planet right now. There's a lot of reaction rather than a lot of being able to sit down, take a breath, calm that nervous system, open up the brain, which literally happens because as the body gets overwhelmed, the nervous system hits the fight, flight, freeze place in the brain. And then this part of the brain that can think or analyze or rationalize is gone. It's literally not available. And any one of us who've ever been triggered by something can say that.
Yeah.
So we have to know how to soothe that nervous system in the way that the child needed it. And what might work for one person might not work for another. So we build a whole tool bag, and that they can draw upon something to help soothe that nervous system so this prefrontal cortex is actually available for analyzation, for having a conversation. And the more that we go through that, we literally reset the nervous system. We're sending a different coding into the brain so that the signals that get sent to the body are different. And also, it happens through the body upward too, because as the body's calmer, the brain can think more effectively.
I'll tell you an interesting story. When ChatGPT came out, as people who know me very closely, like I'm always the first one to know about whatever is the latest and greatest out there. Um, I literally found my peace interacting with it very early on, even when it was like, I don't know, GPT-2 or whatever, because I think for me, I'll tell you a story in a second. It's always been the case that I think I grew up in a very kind of I would say really really nice household where my parents, they're still around, and we talk all the time and all of those things. But to me, the existential crises were always outside the home, outside where my place in life is, what I'm here really to do, what's literally the task at hand. And if I know it, I can aim towards getting better at it. um and it's always been like, oh, first, maybe what's the biggest thing you can do for other people? Maybe you can become a doctor. Or I spent a lot of time doing that, and then right into it I was like, okay, this, the curing of it is very little, the admin, the study of it is very long. So I decided to opt off. And again, I'm now delving into my personal story there, but always had this crisis. Okay, I just don't know what exactly to do, would have the biggest impact. um and then I asked ChatGPT, and I think at that point in time, I think I was like 3 years ago now. The GPT is like, oh, I was like, oh, the wars are starting and all of these things. And I literally asked it, I was like, as children, we go to school, universities, colleges, and all of that. And we're always shown the kind of the light of the world, where this is a model behavior. This is what you're supposed to do. And I don't disagree with it. I mean, no university will be like, oh, yeah, go commit crimes right after the gate. No one does that ever. It's always like, okay, these are the better things. But the moment life hits, like our choices make us good, make us bad, as very much you said, like no child is born with a sense of kind of evil or good. They just all learn in the life. So I asked that question to GPT. I was like, okay, so will there be any end to wars and human suffering? And the answer he gave it to me literally is no. And I was like, and what I really loved about it, that all my life I seeked guidance of, as you said, like the people who are wiser than me, and really, in particular, way, maybe it's like a scientist or like a philosopher or anyone. But I think life is so complicated for me. It bumbles between technology and humanity and media. Like there's just no one person I was able to sat down with who kind of had the overwhelming knowledge of everything, and I was able to shift between the knowledge, kind of not gaps, but for example, if you talk to a philosopher, they might not have the greatest understanding of technologies and vice versa and stuff. Literally said to me, as long as humans have prefrontal cortexes, and as long as they keep on using them, there will be no peace in life.
That's right.
And
If we look at animals, animals don't go to kill because they don't like someone
just food. I
or
need it.
survival,
Yeah.
right? If they're being attacked or they're frightened or whatever. So they do it for a purpose, if you will. But it isn't something that they think about doing. And then after they've done it, they don't carry an emotion with them about it.
Next it is gone on. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And so the cycle of life continues that way. Well, we are animals, but we're animals with a human brain and that prefrontal cortex that can think and analyze and rationalize. But I think the biggest challenge, Waleed, is like that button that I saw yesterday. In humans, we trust.
Yes.
And I think that's our greatest lie that we tell to ourselves because history's been wrong, science has been wrong, you name it. All of us have been wrong. We're all fallible. And so when we go to that source within, though, however people want to call that, when we go to that source within, that inner light that we were born with, and we return to that source that says, I know what's right and I know what's not. And as long as we just do that for ourselves and we treat ourselves kindly and we treat other people kindly, we could work through pretty much everything.
Can that inner compass be misguiding?
If someone believes that inner knowing is something that their head's actually telling them, which is why the prefrontal cortex will always lead us astray if we're not challenging it. So, one of the questions I like to ask myself is we're all judgmental. if I get judgmental, I about someone else or something else, and I say to myself, I take myself through this practice, where do I do that to? Because it always comes back to self. Our job isn't to make other people behave, it's to make ourselves behave. Our job is to be kind with ourselves, that we wouldn't be so unkind to ourselves that we'd be unkind to other people, and to be
It's
loving to
profound.
ourselves so that we would be loving to other people. And when it gets perpetuated that people disconnect and they they lose this sense of self, and when I'm saying self, I'm not talking the small s, which is the human self. I'm talking the big self. That self that somehow planets and stars and everything was created out there. That's a bigger self. There's perfection in the way that the sun
Yeah.
keeps doing its thing and the way that our planet doesn't somehow spin out of orbit.
Yeah, no,
That
absolutely.
we stay going around this and that we have enough light that we can sustain life and that there's water and that there's trees and that there's plants that can feed us. And there's something miraculous about that that no science or literature or history or human can explain. And that's why you can't ever find the person to sit down and get all the answers to because that's not where it's at. But, my dad used to tell me the entire universe is within you. And when people talk about God, where's God? God's within. It's that we have to go inward. And that's why people through meditation, that's why people through nature walks, they feel a sense of peace. They feel a sense of connection because we are. We're connected to something greater than ourselves. And when we get into our very limited human minds, we think we are it.
Yeah.
And we're not. We're just a piece in this whole ginormous, beautiful experience.
I want to add to that. The Hopefully next time when you come around, there will be a picture hanging above my desk. I'm pointing in my studio at the moment. I have the frames. I haven't found time. I found the picture. It's the Do you know about the poem about from Carl Sagan, Pale Blue Dot?
No.
Uh, it's the most brilliant piece of things that anytime anything happens in my life, I just look at that thing and I just recalibrate it immediately. It's the
You
immediate
know I'm gonna look it up now.
It, it's it's a poem about I don't know if Robin can play definitely in the post for people listening to it, but I can show you actually.
I'd
Uh,
love to see it.
it's a very small poem, but Barbara, it's the most profound thing I think. Whenever you feel lost, you look at that thing. At least for me, it's like straight. This is what it is. Um, Carl Sagan was an American astronomer,
Yes. Mhm.
a very famous one, and he had this poem called "Pale Blue Dot." It was very fascinating. They picked up sounds of humanity. It's the sound of bird. There was a couple of music or whatever, and they put it on a probe and they just sent it out to space. And they had this moment where they could control the flow of it and the direction of it a little bit. And there was a certain point across Saturn, I think, where it could afterwards it was just lost. Like you don't have any control over it because it's just too far. He asked, can it turn one last time towards Earth and take a picture of it? So the picture that you saw in the beginning, it was that picture.
Wow.
And that's when he wrote this poem. And to me, it's the most remarkable thing ever.
It's so moving to me because this is the exact experience I have when I go into prayer. I lose sense of myself, not in a way that I lost sense of myself when I was younger, but in the vastness of knowing that I'm part of something so big that's so unexplainable. That's the surrender for me. It's the not needing to be able to define or to explain something, but it's this inner peace in knowing that I am part of something so profound that humans have a really hard time getting any grasp around, but it's always for me when I go into a place of prayer and I just connect there, and it makes me emotional every time, just like that did, because it is so beautiful. It to me, there's no fear there, there's no sadness there, there's nothing human there. It is so far beyond that, and to me, that's where I think when chat says to you, as long as we have this
we
prefrontal cortex,
we ain't
but
having
it could
peace.
be that as long as we're using that for our answers, that we stay stuck. But when we start turning within, what I say is the heart is wise and the brain is very intelligent, but we need to not confuse the two. When we're thinking about how to approach something and we get all the thoughts jumbled in there and that overthinking and that fear that get, but what if this and the FOMO and all these things that are happening, it's not wise. It's just trying to sort through, what are you telling me to do here? And when we give it a more direct instruction, that I want to know where to find my peace, then the brain can start, well, how about this? Or how about
Yes.
this? Or maybe this will work for you. It works as a support system to what the heart wants. So when you're there looking for what it is that you want to share with the planet,
Yeah.
and where your passion lies, that comes from the heart, from that wisdom. And for me, it was in psychology, and it was in helping people regain their own authenticity on the planet, and to remember that the entire world, the entire universe is within us, and we're within it. One cannot be without the other.
It's
And
beautiful.
when we are life has taught us in so many ways how to disconnect from the heart. And I'm not just saying, oh, just follow the heart all the time, because, the heart can have flights of fantasy. It's to say, though, I'm starting here. And to me, that prayer, that meditation, that walk out in nature, it takes us to that place where we go silent in the mind for a period of time and we can tune into the messages of the heart. Then we know what's true. Then we know, I'm gonna grab one of your tissues here.
Yeah.
Then we know whether it's fabricated in our minds or whether it's the truth of our heart, and that is the process I think ultimately we will all have to get to be able to move out of the construct that we have created for ourselves.
That's so true. And I think, I don't know. This is this again. I'm trying to print it and put it above my desk. I do have a standing desk, so I was like, I want to be able to see it all the time. But this is any given time, like someone can ask me, like, okay, what is that doctrine? It literally is this point. It's just so profound, and it has so many layers of understanding. And I think it, at least on a psychological front, it solves so many things for me at any given time as well. That whenever I feel a bit lost, you're absolutely right that it tells you what's your place in the universe, and it tells you what's the universe inside you as well. So yes, I will be forgotten, and maybe, I mean, you think about death for a second. I don't know, we're going slightly like a bit dim topics, but what's gonna happen? Like literally one day I'll be dead, and the people who, maybe my friends, family, whoever's close to me, they'll come together, and at any given time, someone's going to complain about, okay, the food was not great, and this could have been done better. 2 days later, I'll be forgotten. It'll be a Friday, and by Monday, they'll be back to work. But the sense of pride that I have lived my life with, that, oh, I need to have this thing, I need to do that thing, otherwise I'm not going to be, feel significant, I feel like the king of the world. No, I mean, what king?
For me, I think it comes down to when you take your last breath, can you look back and say, I was a good human?
Yeah.
Was I kind to people? Did I share love? Did I try to help other people remember that beautiful light within themselves too?
And your brain won't lie to you at that point in time.
Well, I've raised all my kids to know that there's two people that you can't lie to, and that's yourself and God. You can convince the entire world, but that last breath that you take, there's no escaping it. Even if you've pushed it so far out of your mind, you know if you've been a good human or not.
Robert, tell me what, as a mother, what do you think you have been successful in instilling in your children? And I'm gonna ask a slightly harder one. What are the things you're still working on? You feel like I'm not there.
Yeah, that's
Haven't
not hard
prepared.
for me because it's a regular for me, so
I haven't prepared my kids for this for the world.
um, I think what each of my children know is how loved they are, regardless of whether they have succeeded or failed in human terms. Um, it's that they're striving to be better humans, that they're striving to know God, to know that they are part of something so vast and important, um, and to know that the love and care of one another really matters. I've told my kids what I want for all of them is to know how important they are to each other. Even when they get upset with each other or they don't like what each other's done, it's to remember that there's love and there's a connection there built on love in our family. And so in that, I think I've done well in sharing with my kids how much I love them so that they know that they are what so often people don't feel is lovable. And that's a human construct too,
Yeah.
because babies know they're lovable. I mean, they come from that beautiful blue, that pale blue dot out there.
Yeah.
So they know they're lovable. But again, that's the wisdom, right? It's the knowing there, not the intellect. The growing edges for me are many, many. Um, Going back in time, I've told my kids, I wish I would have known how to be centered within myself to know who I am and to then find a partner to marry and to have that experience with that person also. It's not that we 100% absolutely ever know ourselves, but we know our patterns, we know our approaches, we know if we're going to be heading down that path that feels true or doesn't feel true. And because so many of the challenges my kids have gone through, I've taken ownership for. Even though there was a father involved, it was that I took ownership for not being awake and alert before having children. So I would never turn back and change a thing because I wouldn't trade in any of my kids. However, I tell them, Have your experiences, get to know yourself. You travel, go to school, read the Bible, do something to get to know yourself. And then choose your partner consciously. I was very unconscious. So I try to be more and more and more conscious. That's my ongoing process because I still have my triggers. I still have my things that can pop up out of the blue inside of me
Yeah.
if I'm having a dialogue with someone. And what I try to do is learn from that and learn and learn. And then also the challenges for me are still trying to parent my kids as they're almost all adults because I see now the errors of my own way, and generationally, I've also taught them some of those errors,
Yeah.
and so I'm wanting to help them correct, and then I have to be reminded that they're adults, and so then I try to impart some wisdom where I can, but there's a part of me still that is a caretaker and a rescuer, which I'm very mindful of. However, there's times with my kids, I just want to help them course correct, and then I have to remember they too are in this vast universe, and there's much more intelligence out there than I have, and that somehow everything's probably in divine order. It
Yeah.
it doesn't stop me from wanting to try.
That's
So
very mother-like. Yeah. What would your dad say about? Would you say like you've been a great mother to his grandchildren?
I would say he would say yes, because he really taught me in the big scheme of the universe, there are no mistakes, meaning that this is how we evolve and we grow, but here in the human sense, there's a lot of mistakes. In the larger sense, have I done due diligence to evolve and to grow? Yeah. So how could I really be faulted for that? I think the greatest failure is not doing anything to change. Not it, so many people say, well, if I try that and I fail, then I'm a failure. And to me, it's no, if you never try, then you will never know. And so it's always a success if you go out there and you try and you fail it. That's a success. So you learned a way not to do it.
Yeah.
And so you keep along that path, but what happens is this aliveness starts to happen inside, and that essence, that true essence, and that light within starts to get sparked again. And then that confidence grows. And it's like, it's okay if people aren't liking what I'm doing. I feel really happy inside. I feel that genuine sense of joy, that joy that, like, when I close my eyes, I feel, not the joy that my head tries to tell me, "Oh, this is what's going to make me happy." It's really discerning the difference, knowing the voice of the heart versus the voice of the head.
One, I think so many people I've seen that they just know have that distinction very clearly in life, when to listen to what. And so many people who just, they'll be like 50-55. Ah, let's just do it. And I think it's just, when you were saying this, I think it reminded me of, I saw some of the clips the other day about that Jim Carrey movie, The Yes Man.
Yes.
It's just, and it's just so remarkable piece of literature written there that, I mean, and you can see the guy's journey. No, 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 and nothing is happening. He's just saying yes to all sorts of. I remember the scene of him sitting in the car in the movie, and a homeless person is like, "Can you give me a ride?" Yes, and he's like, "Okay," and then he's like, "Can you give me a couple of bucks?" Yes, and he just gives it to them, and it's that part, and I think I really love movies in that respect, that especially the writers, that they have to squeeze in a lot of, I mean, we love movies because there's something we can sort of relate to, and that's
Yes.
what, if
Mhm.
most people can relate to it, it's a blockbuster hit. That's how we equate it to it. But I love the writing of it, is that they didn't opt out of the pain. Of course it was in the kind of a comedic character, but it is pain. Like, why would I give my money to homeless person? Pain. But then he slowly, immediately realized, and it just liberated him. And he's just giving out loans to kids. I mean, it went on and on and on stuff. But that's what I feel like. I think you're very right, that going back to what you said as well, that we just never summon up the courage for just getting over that first barrier of pain, to open ourselves up, maybe be open to learning. Perhaps maybe there's just more eyes on us now, and the judgment might not be just your friends and your neighbor. Because I think California is that place. If I have read history correctly, um, it used to be that, really got populated during the gold rush in 1850s or something, where I think it always represented that kind of a state of feeling where the life on sort of East Coast is not, sorry, East Coast or West Coast?
We're on the West
Oh,
Coast.
it's on the West.
Mhm.
Sorry, I look at the other way. So it's on the East Coast. It's like, oh, like, oh, mid America, whatever. And when life is giving you all sorts of troubles, you head west, and that's when people can. And I think that's where the sense of people, like, with people trying to trace back, like, why Silicon Valley is like as it is, and why this is the place. I mean, you wouldn't think of it among all the different things. Like, it never had like the greatest of architecture or whatever. Like, how come? And I think people really underestimated the how people are there. As
There's
it
a
was,
lot of falseness,
yeah, it was,
and there's a lot of portrayal of things
yeah.
that even the gold rush,
Oh, do
when
you think it
you
was not true?
oh, no, no, that there was some, but, then a lot of people rushed out there, that's why it was the gold rush, that
Yeah,
rushed out there, but didn't find all that gold. And so, yes, there was some gold to be found, and it's like people rush to Hollywood because
yeah,
they
yeah.
want to be a starlet or a star,
Silicon
and
Valley, same
and the
thing.
Silicon Valley, they're gonna build this next blockbuster,
Yeah,
company. And yes, there are some people that have that, but there's a lot of falsity to it too. And to me, there's nothing wrong with pursuing a dream if that's what you want to go after. It's knowing that when you're going after something and it's to try to get something from the outside to give it back to you. Once I have money, fortune, or fame, people will like me. I'll be worth something. I can,
Oh yeah.
tout myself, which is a lot of California. And not all. I mean, there's beautiful parts of California. However, there's a lot of falsity there too. And I think that it if we look at how much of the world now focuses on the outside, do I look the right way? Am I acting the right way in all this? We've lost again that connection.
Let's talk about California. I love that place. You have grown up there. What do you think is
Born and
happening?
raised.
Born and raised in Cali. um, you last time I spoke to you, you weren't happy with the things as they were.
I'm not. I'm actually, which I didn't consider much before, but I'm actually thinking of moving out of the state. And I think a lot of it is when I grew up, we were in a small town. It became a city the year I was born. So it was small town. We had a lot of farmers. We had a neighborhood watch where all the neighborhood people would watch out for everybody's kids. You didn't even have to know the neighbor. It was more wholesome.
Hmm.
And there was the sense of connection that had happened. And my experience now is California is very disconnected. I can't say in totality because there's many regions of California, but I think in terms of looking over the welfare of the people, um, in prices, which goes into the welfare of the people, but just the sense of I feel that I'm very sensitive in emotionally, but also in just feeling things around me, which I think all people are, some more so,
Of
some
course,
less,
yeah.
and some have really removed themselves from it, and some people are more attuned to it. But I feel the level of disconnection. I feel the level of anger and irritation and um, this, I don't know, it's such a polarity that I feel there where before I felt like there was much more connection to it.
Isn't that all over the world?
It is from what I see. And though I have to tell you, we were just in Finland and I loved it there. And part of the reason that I did, because I'm a big observer too, I love to observe things. But I see the families out together pushing their pram or their stroller in the rain, didn't matter. I
Yes.
see the kids, we went to a sauna, an outdoor sauna near the Baltic Sea, and I see the families coming in and all these kids running and jumping in the saunas. I think they said it's something like they have 5 million people in 3.5 million saunas. So maybe there's something to that. But there was, even though the people weren't necessarily engaging with me as a traveler, it's that you could feel even at the airport when we were waiting to board the plane, the various queues or lines that people just waited until their number was called or their letter was called, whatever boarding. And they just waited. There wasn't grumbling, there wasn't complaining, there wasn't trying to push ahead. It was this, it's not my turn. You
Yes.
could feel that in them. So there wasn't like a disruption. And so then we get on the plane. The plane was the most peaceful plane I've ever been on.
Those are
People were
big
just
words.
quiet and calm and then we get off the plane and the airport has birds chirping, and that's the sound, and they have nature built into the airport.
Oh, as in like in a
Sound system.
sound. Okay.
You
Oh,
go into the
interesting.
restroom and it's birds chirping. Everything says relax.
Oh wow.
And then when we got to all the places we were going, there just wasn't a level of chaos. You could feel the connection with nature. You could feel the connection with other human beings. And I think they're rated like the happiest
Yeah,
country
yeah.
in the world.
Scandinavian countries
And
are.
and it makes sense.
And how was the feeling in contrast to when you landed in Heathrow in London?
Day and night. Day and night. I mean, it feels chaotic. It feels, dirty.
Yeah.
Um, it felt nonsensical. And over in Finland, yes, it's a smaller country, I understand that. However, it's just this flow to it, and here it's all this
Big, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the same thing. Any big city you go to, I think you get the same feeling. And I thought about this question quite a lot. You go to Tokyo, you don't get that. And I think one of the reasons might be is the having a bit of a homogenous culture. And I think at any given, I think it used to be the case like London and New York, and I wouldn't say as much about San Francisco, but especially London and New York. They're like so old and so historical, like generations have come and gone and all sorts of things. So it carries a lot of that intercultural mix that people from, let's say in London, people from Italy are here, people from Scandinavia. There's like whole blocks of like, so London is a huge city. If you go to Clapham, there's like a part here which is a lot of Australians live there. You go to another part, like there's a lot of this, ethnicity lives here. And I think it has something to do with that, that we, as much as we are humans and all of that, but we do carry cultural nuances
Oh,
with us.
without a doubt.
And I think when the time for consensus or something like that comes up, those cultural nuances do play up. I mean, I think I just can't even think of it being right and wrong. It's just a human nature thing. For example, in certain culture, maybe a person with a tall, dark, handsome guy is like, "Oh, this should be the person to select mayor." And the other culture might be, "Oh, we should promote women a bit more." Clash.
Yes.
So it's you just have that. And I think one thing I maybe observed about Scandinavia, and I'm not being, I think there's nothing to do with kind of a racism or anything like that whatsoever. It's purely like a demographical observance that the same thing goes with like China as well. Like they maintain their kind of homogeneity of the culture, so the decision making was a bit more I would say on average bit fast. Same with Japan as well. It's I was there, I think last year in I think April timeframe. In Tokyo you would not see literally any litter on the street. Weirdly, they didn't have any benches anyways. Like you just cannot find an outdoor bench to sit, like everyone is just walking. There's like have these spots for like putting things in, and you can it just felt like, oh, it's designed for like a certain culture. I mean, they had their own things. For example, I went to like a sushi restaurant, and then they had the sushi on a like a on a kind of a it was like kind of motorized like kind of roller thing. You just sit here, just eat, and literally the person would come up, and you can, so the different kinds of sushis coming up, and you can just literally point them, I want this, and they'll prepare it. The guy's right in the middle, and they'll just lay it on the plate. You would know that the guy has prepared and it's landed on that side. It will, no one else will take your plate, and it will come right in front of you, and you'll just take it. And I just love that there are just some cultural
It's
elements
a
of how you do it.
respect.
But at the same time, the lady would come and they would literally just scan the number of plates you've taken. This is your bill. I was like, this is so high tech. The moment you get into the metros, the train station, there's literally, I don't know if it's true or not, but there's like a kind of almost like an old chap who's counting how many people are coming in and going out. I was like, surely they could have designed a way to like maybe monitor and all of that. But I think now they are facing, I've heard this news that they've opened up immigration like big time because they're facing this problem of old age.
Mhm. I've
There's not
heard.
enough people to like go about do jobs and all of that. And I think you'll see, and it's fascinating these things that I think 100 years ago, Japan was again close to the world. Americans were like the first kind of external travelers went there, and Japanese folks are like, "Oh, we would love to buy the arms from you." And then there's so many movies about this kind of fascinating thing as well. And then as World Wars happen and all of that, and they opened to the world big time. But now they realize, okay, they cannot have their ways. I mean, the samurai culture and all of that is long dead. Like
Mhm.
there's just no
Mhm.
samurais in Japan anymore. At least what I've read about it. And now you're gonna see in next 50 years there's gonna be another version of Japan. So I think that's it's what's happening, that countries which are maybe too small, some Eastern European countries, maybe Scandinavian countries, that they don't they don't need they're self-sufficient at the moment, so there's no need for massive changes. But because there are a lot of prefrontal cortexes in London and in New York, change is required at any given point,
Mhm.
because it's not about it's like a small it's like a huge ship with a very small rudder. Like who's gonna take control of it? And I came to terms with it already now, especially living in London, that I cannot expect the London to look like how I want it to be. If it was up to me, everything would be just business, business. But there was a guest on the pod before, and she said like, "Oh, billboards are bad." I was like, "Well, I mean," she's like, "Oh, why do you not notice that every time you go to like a less developed part of London, there are tons and tons of billboard. The moment you go to Hyde Park has no billboards. Regent Park has no billboards, and it's literally next to the most expensive properties in
Mhm.
the world.
Mhm.
Like, do you not think there's a correlation between all of those things?" So fascinating. I don't know what to do about it. I don't think so. Anyone does.
I think one of the challenges, though, as humans that we run into is different people have different cultures, and we don't all agree with those cultures. And I think, as you said, the clashes happen in there. When we have cultures that people can respect, they don't have to like it, but they can respect. I think those are two very different things.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things we don't like, but it's a level again of more of a genuine level of respect of even in a disagreement, I can say to you, I
Yeah.
respect your opinion because the way that you bring it is in a way that's respectful of me too. And I think that is the greatest breakdown is, America, we're the melting pot. We're known as that, but there's when we go to different areas, there's some levels that have more respect for people. And I think that's part of what has pushed me a bit out of the California lifestyle is the just that sense of we're all in this together versus I come first. That kind of mentality that because I feel this way or I think this way, it should be that way rather than this respectful dialogue. And as it was said, can't remember who said it, I think maybe Byron Katie, but that war belongs on paper.
Yeah.
Why? Because you have to sit down and you have to handwrite it out and you have to
Absolutely.
think about it, many iterations of it before you ever get a final document. And we are so quick to everything now that we don't really stop to say, am I respecting myself in this? Am I respecting you in this? Are you doing that for me as well? Everything's just so accelerated that I think it makes it challenging when you have a cultural mix to the degree that we do now.
What do you think about the current political atmosphere in America from a professional clinical psychologist perspective? That these personalities are we never used to have such a strong, again, melting pot of different personalities. I think especially this administration, it is quite unique. There are a lot of business people, former business people, current business people. Your president is a business guy. I mean, he's been real estate and all those kind of things. The abruptness of what you just said is the level of it is just the world has just never seen, and I think it's kind of changing the world order in one way. And when I say world order, for me it means like uh, Ray Dalio had a very nice book about like the changing world order, like how what layer by layer what happens and the world order changes. I have my other startup with Onyx Pay. We deal a lot of with fintech ventures. We're seeing that the world is moving away from the US dollar as like the default currency to trade. I think the economics of like and the nitty gritty details of why for America it was the best thing ever that the whole world is trading in there, because it's the American treasury is printing those dollars. but everywhere you can go in the world, that will be accepted. That phenomena is not it was an extreme of like what everyone was used to try to do like since stone ages. I might come to your village shop with, I don't know, with potatoes, and you'll be like, give me some grains or whatever. You'll be like, I don't need grains. Oh, damn it. And we that's why the cash was developed and all of those things. But with that will
But we had to find an agreement.
yes, that it's like I think it's written on American dollar as well. Like it's based to the treasure or whatever. Like upon giving it to the government, you will receive equivalent value or something. I forgot the official term for it. But we're seeing this like this abruptness of characters, which is yielding in uncertainty in global markets as well. Then everyone is again. You feel like countries are behaving like your neighbor that you don't like. That
Yeah.
it's just an individual. They're showing a
I
lot
think
of
individuals are acting like that.
perhaps
And
that's
it's
true. That's very much true. Yeah,
and it's also showing up on the larger scale too in countries.
that I think yeah, take my word back. I think individuals are doing it, and as a collective, countries are look like they're doing it as well. What has gone wrong with people there?
Well, I have my personal feelings about it, and for me, I think when we lose sight of that level of respect, that level of connection, the level of well-being, and that's of the individuals. So when we lose sight of the humans involved and we get more into um, our opinions of things, I think it goes back to looking at those images in Auschwitz. You have such a stark contrast. You have these people who were emaciated down to nothing who died. And then you have this wealth over here with fur coats and things. But I don't think it comes down to money and all the things that we layer it down to because everybody points their finger out. Oh, it's the economy. Oh, it's the government. Oh, it's education. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. It comes down to that pale blue dot that we have gotten so fixated into our opinions that we don't have room for other people in it. And that I think the easier life becomes in terms of having what you need at your disposal, the less mindful we are as humans. And I think that we're in a place where we've gotten really mindless. And that's why, again, even going back to the question of what do I think I did right with my kids, It's the it's to retain that there's something bigger than you. And when it's for me, it's God, and then it's having my family, and then it's service to other people. And so with all the disruption that's happening planetarily, we have, in my humble opinion, we are in the greatest battle of dark and light. I don't think it's money, I don't think it's politics, I don't think it's education, I think it's the darkness that's within people. When we look at that yin yang, I think that
Mm,
darkness is showing itself in such a greater degree to where we can harm people in all kinds of ways, whether it's economically or we can harm them physically, emotionally, we can do all this harm and not have a second thought about it. And so I think that we can try to autocorrect all these other things, politics or everything else, but that's not going to do it. It's just going to shift it somewhere else. It's slippery that way. That's what I like to say. I think it really comes down to the part of humanity that has been lost, and I feel like people's souls are being sucked. That's what I think. If we look at the fentanyl crisis,
yes.
that's not just in California. It's prevalent in California, and this is, some very private disclosure here, but my oldest daughter had a opioid addiction, which turned into heroin, and then when fentanyl came on the scene, and the darkness she has lived in, and she and I actually have started a YouTube channel to talk
I
about
saw
that.
the video. Yes.
Uh, and it's between relapse and redemption because it's the between space. It's not that, "Oh, you're relapsed and that's how you are," or "You're redeeming yourself, that's how you are." It's the between space that we're all in, and for her getting lost in the darkness of drugs, in getting lost in the darkness of being homeless and all the things that happen on that street and the harm that's been inflicted on her and the harm that she's inflicted on others through the conversations we've had. I asked her, do you think that it's the drugs or it's something else?" And she said, "No, there is a dark force behind it." Now, whether we wanna call that dark forces in the economic system or in the government or in the education system or the medical system, it's a darker force, and it's the one that makes us feel horrible about ourselves, and it's the one that makes us feel horrible about other people, and
Wow.
that purity of light that a baby is when they're born, that one doesn't grow up to be a drug addict. It doesn't grow up to be the one who will do harm to another person and take someone's life from them, unless that darkness gets in there and steals that light. That's what I really truly believe is that the light is being stripped from people.
I'm going to take this conversation slightly. I love your openness to things today because you have I rarely, very rarely, you have a guest who can talk about these things as openly as you have. So I'm really honored about that. Um, I think I was listening to. I'll come to your daughter in a second. I think given like kind of a zoom out picture, I was listening to this creators called Colin and Samir. They are like the OG YouTube creators and everything. I mean, I followed them to get what's the latest and greatest in the world of creativity and all of that. And yesterday's episode I saw, it was about how in China they have these things called vertical dramas. Barbara, just like you have TikTok, which came, it's a. I'm trying to get to a point through this example that there's something about China that they saw these technologies and they have an understanding of it in particular related to America that I don't think so it has worked anywhere else in the world. And I think there's a lot of linkages between how um, and I think I might be speaking out of my depth there. This is pure anecdotal and I haven't done my personal research about this thing, so
I
purely
love the
anecdotal.
open conversation though. It's two minds speaking to each other, two
Yeah,
hearts
it
speaking to each other.
I think there's something the two things at play here. You're very right that there's something hollow within people. How it happened, there's so many different reasons. And there's exploitation of that
Yes.
hollowness. And I think we are living in a
Which
time,
means that there's a hollow person who's exploiting a hollow person.
big time. We are living in a time where the wars that we are fighting, you might see them, they are tanks and all of that. Those are conventional. They're not going to go anywhere. I work in fintech and we understand like the threats that economic warfare can have on people. If I am a so hopefully before the end of the year or early next year we'll have the ability to issue debit cards. um, I can just turn off, and not that it's that motivation at all, but Visa or Mastercard, these are private companies, they're public companies, but essentially they can be turned off, not by themselves. Someone can literally hack through the servers, and suddenly all of London cannot use debit card
Yes.
anymore. Good luck buying bread. Good luck getting on tube. We saw just last week or the week before that there was tube strikes. Literally, the whole of London was just upside down. Restaurants were saying that, oh, because people are not coming out of the home because there's just so much traffic, that week is essentially a write off. Like they cannot make any money. So just with like a we are so
And the cyber attack that just happened
the
on the
cyber attack
airport.
at the airport. I mean,
Mhm.
they're being telling you come 6 hours, 4 hours earlier
Mhm.
to the airport.
Mhm. Because
So
they have to hand process everything.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I'm thinking. That I understand that there might be within individuals part of it that's some hollowness, but I'm of the opinion a little bit. I'm leaning more on the external side. Like, I don't think so. Just like let's say your dad, it's always been the case that humans have fought through tough times. But when the external is not there, there might be an opportunity. You talk to friends, family, or this community around, they might deter you into the, doing the right thing. But because the communities are taken out, the friends and families have been taken out, you're just literally vulnerable to whatever the. I literally, let's say I'm a capitalist. I run businesses. I love free market and all of that. But I would literally use the word, let's say, quote unquote, corporations who will come in and then be like, let's exploit that person. And I just seeing, and for me, I'm honest in saying that because for me, I see the inner workings of it. I know how these things are designed. Luckily for, I mean, whatever reason, my work is not such that we are in those kind of markets whatsoever. But I just see how products are designed not to last long
Hmm.
because they want you to be on that cycle of just keep on
Sure.
buying every year, new one, new one. It's kind of like that spigot, like that never satisfies your thirst. So you're always under it, doing all of that. So I think it's the same. I'm leaning again more on that side. There might be an external factor beyond the country
The
that we're living
external
in.
factors that were created by the humans.
I 100%, yes.
So the cycle just goes
It's,
back.
we're just killing each other.
Yeah, yeah, and yes, history repeats itself, whether it's fashion in history or whether
I
it's
just,
architecture, but it repeats itself, and the way I see it is the hope is that we choose to evolve from it. That at some point we say,
yeah.
do we really want to still be exploiting people? I mean, yes, there's exploitation all over the planet, some to a greater degree and some to a lesser. However, it really then is about that human that's in there. The plants aren't exploiting each other. The
Mm.
animals don't exploit each other. The waters, the rains, they don't exploit each other. It's that humans do that.
It reminds me of Einstein's quote, like someone asking how the third world war is going to be fought. He's like, I don't know about that, but the fourth one would be sticks and stones.
Right?
I just don't want to live through another 1940 to 1945.
Mhm.
And I don't know why. I think the generation of the people who were living there, arguable. I mean, no human is full of like, there's always yin and yang in
Sure.
people. Churchill on, UK, and this the characters. But I love the fact that there was a bunch of people who sat down and be like, and I'm not sure if I remember this correctly, but it's literally in the articles of United Nations or something that what they saw, what we did to each other, the United Nations was created literally to avoid that. And I don't think so. We're back where we started. I don't know. I'm gonna blame, and I don't know. Maybe our generation can have a bit of a course correction, but I'm gonna blame the generation in between a little bit. That they didn't do an enough of a job of telling us what it used to be. Uh, because I don't think so. Anyone who, or maybe I blame the technology. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to play that kind of a blame game, but I feel like there's a bit of a gap in between, like the generation who thought, "Oh my God, what a terrible thing! Let's create institutions like United Nations so we end up not killing each other." And there was a huge kind of 70s, 80s, roaring 70s, 80s, huge economic prosperity, all of those things. But as you said, there's always been difference of opinions of people, but never in history we have come down so low that the humanity is being violated like nothing else. I just I don't agree with you, that's first, but I just don't want to see your face and get off the table. You don't even belong on the table.
Mhm.
I mean, where is that going
Mhm.
to lead us?
You don't belong on the planet. Mhm. That it goes to such an extreme that there is a choice of life, my
Yeah,
life or your life.
yeah,
And I think that's how low we've sunk. And I also think that the way most humans change, there's that 1% out there that will say, wait a minute, I need to make a course correction. It happens right now. But the majority of people have to have a big enough chasm
yeah,
in between this and to have this awakening happen in the middle of it.
yeah,
That small gap in between, most people, they just keep on with whatever their habits are. And if they're not conscious of what habits they're being taught, then that also propagates a problem there too, because then they just become followers of
Yeah.
whatever's happened. But it's when these gaps get big enough that, again, that picture in Dachau, when it's the, what? This happened? How did that happen? How's that possible? Well, now the mind opens up.
Yeah.
And so it seems that we're moving into one of the biggest chasms of life as a whole around the planet, that we're having to start to question, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? I don't think we're there yet. I think some people are. And I think some people are now regrouping themselves to be in a place such as I want to do. I say I'm in the last trimester of my life, is what I say now. And I don't want to spend the last trimester of my life in trauma and fighting.
Thinking about war. Yeah.
That's how I spent the first trimester and into the second trimester of my life, not fully. But I'm done with that trauma part. That's not how I want to live. So that, going back to California, that's why I don't want to live in there, because there's so much conflict that's happening in there.
Are you worried about your life, your children, your grandchildren, and in America, modern day America?
I am. I am. My oldest son and his wife and their baby, they're moving to a different state because they can't afford to buy anything in California. And so I have concern, but they're smart and I trust them. And I know that they're going to take them some place where they'll be able to create something where they can actually be with their children while they're raising them,
Yeah.
rather than having to work all over the place. And um with my other son, he's very sensible, so I don't have concern about him. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's very connected to the heart, and I know that he'll find a place that feels that he can really prosper emotionally, physically, financially, but in that way that he and his future wife and future children can actually be good stewards on the planet. So I trust that. With my daughter, who is now 8 months clean from her addiction,
Congratulations.
yeah, it's to her. I mean, all props go to her, because that battle of that dark and light was very real inside of her, and as many times as I had hoped she'd come out of that, this time I could tell there was a shift. And if you
Mm.
don't mind, I'll share with you what happened.
No, absolutely. I think people listening, there definitely is benefit to them.
So, as I had said, there's some things from when I had raised my children, and a lot of times the children were fatherless. I think that there's great value in having a mother and a father in a home if that's possible and it's healthy. But because women and men bring a different attribute to children, and it's not just a one sided approach. So my kids mostly only had me. And with that, also a lot of the struggles that were going on financially, and worried about where we're going to live, those things that a lot of people experience on the planet. But to my point, is with my daughter, it was challenging for her. She's a very sensitive person, has a really big heart, and it impacted her a lot. So she tried to find her group where she could kind of land and feel a part of something, because she felt so much of the turmoil. She's my oldest child, and she landed with the people who would exploit her light,
Yeah.
because she was very bright. And then okay, I'm bonded with them now. And I tried to tell her, these really aren't your friends. Only as they're getting what they need from you are they your friends. But as soon as you step back, they're not there anymore. You're excluded, or you're targeted, one of the two, which we see a lot on the planet too. And so, in any case, that wasn't enough to break her free, because she had to come to that awakening within herself. And this last time, she had gotten arrested for using drugs again, and she called me and asked me if I'd bail her out, which I had done before, not every time, but over 20 years, it's a course. And I said, "No, I won't." And this time I could tell by her response that she was ready for something. So when I talked about that willingness, that openness to make a change, she said, "Mom, I don't know what to do." I said I'd never get here again. It had been 6 years prior since she'd been in jail. And I said, "Get down on your knees and pray. Surrender yourself to God." And she said, "Mom, I gotta go. They're locking us down right now." She said, "I'm gonna do it." And she told me from that moment, she started experiencing things within herself and thoughts and this happiness and this joy inside of her. And she said at first she thought, "I'm just going to fake it here. I'm just going to fake it because I don't really know what I'm doing." But mom said to do this, and I wanted her opinion, and I trust mom. And the one thing that she also told me was, "I have never doubted your love for me, even when she was going through all this." So that anchor of love again. And so she asked for a Bible and she started reading some of it. And after about 2 weeks, she said, "Mom," she said, "thank you." She said, "I know that I don't know where I'm headed. I don't know how all this is going to happen, but something has shifted in me." And I felt it in her because her dad was saying, "I don't know, this is what we've been down so many times before." And I said, "No, I feel it. There's something different in her." And by golly, after 8 months, it is not just, I hope she stays clean. I already know it. It is something deeply within, excuse me, within her shifted, and she has reconnected to that light within her. And that, uh, that change is so fundamental. She's still got a lot of processing to do through the trauma she's been through and other things, but it's that moment where these two divides came together and she came back to here and she connected in here. And so with that, this chasm that's been brewing in her life for 20 years is now not a chasm anymore. And that is more the overall, as I said, what I think is happening in humanity, no matter which way you pull it. But the more that we have the things to exploit people, drugs, money, things that those things that pull you towards something and away from yourself, then we have more opportunity for people to have control. And we think we have control, but here's my kind of funny, maybe not so funny, theory. Okay, so going back to the war thing, right? Are we going to have this and it's going to blow up the planet? And now we're sticks and stones again. Is, let's say we take 20 or 200 billionaires, I don't care how many, and they say, okay, let's make a pact here and let's set off those nukes. We'll be in our bunkers. We'll be down underneath. We'll all be good. We have plenty of everything we need. And then once it's okay, we'll all come back out again. Well, what do you think's going to happen? They're still going to want to be a top dog.
Yeah.
So now they're going to start fighting amongst themselves and doing the same exact thing. And I'm not saying billionaires are bad. I work with a couple and they're amazing human beings. It's not money that's the problem, it's the people that are the problem. And so we have all those, say, billionaires, because they were the ones that could afford to have the bunkers and all the food
Yeah.
and supplies. And so now they have, I don't know if you've ever read the book by Dr. Seuss, Yertle the Turtle, but the king of Salamasand, he wanted to be the highest one on the stack of the turtles so he could oversee everything. And then there's Mac there on the bottom, and his shell gets cracked because of all the weight on him. But the same thing would happen even if we have these 200 billionaires out there who survived, the nuclear fallout, that now someone's going to want to be top dog. And
Yeah.
now there's going to be more fighting. And who's going to be doing the work, right? So it's a human problem.
It's every airplane kind of a sea wreck movie ever. You get on the plane, this it starts with the scene where there's like a billionaire who's on a yacht or something. Yacht crashes, the bus boy or whatever, the waiting staff is suddenly like, I'm the king here. So that dynamic, I mean, it's just, you're very right. This the human nature, and it's very brutal, and it's, to be honest, it's very animalistic, and it's like dog eats dog kind of a mentality.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think we disguise ourselves with civility, but boy, oh boy, we are terrible.
Have you ever seen the movie Doctor Strange? It's a Marvel movie.
Uh, I love all the Marvel
Oh,
characters.
yeah.
Yes,
Well,
I'm a big
okay, so
time Marvel fan.
Doctor Strange is my favorite movie, and the reason
Why
for
is
that
that?
is because Doctor Stephen Strange, he's this fantastic neurosurgeon who
Yes,
memorizes all these songs and lyrics and dates, and he knows no wrong, and then he has that horrible accident,
yes,
and at that moment, it's like we were talking about before, that someone suicides or they rise. And for him, it was that awakening. First, all his arrogance and his anger. How could this happen to me? To me, right? I'm this top notch neurosurgeon. And yes, he did phenomenal work, but he lost the heart of what he was doing. And so he runs into the guy who says, "Yeah, you rejected me. You wouldn't even see me because it wasn't an interesting enough case for you."
yeah,
Humility sets in, right? And in that humility, then he says, "But you have something I need. You healed yourself. How'd you do that?" So now the roles change
yeah,
and he becomes humble in, "I need you now. Before you needed me, I cast you away, but I need you and you're willing to give me that information." And then he goes and then he has to basically pay the price for everything
yeah,
and to be able to get in. And then he's, stereotypically thinking someone else is the master over here
yeah,
and then goes on this extremely spiritual journey and then comes back with, "Wait, no," and then boom, out there again, and then has to face himself that he can't conjure up this energy within him. And that energy, whether we call it love, whether we call it kindness, whether we call it, that inner spark or inner light, he had to reclaim that. He had to remember that within himself. He had to awaken to that. And then he had to work with it to build it up again so that then he could go and fight the darkness out there. But originally, the darkness was within him. And I loved that movie for that because I think there was
yeah.
so much woven within that movie, and whoever wrote it, I think, is brilliant because they took something so esoteric or so, taboo that we don't talk about in mainstream, but we're gonna weave it into a movie that speaks straight down into that heart.
I think that's what I love about movies. I think um, is to say Marvel is one of my favorite sort of. I absolutely love Marvel. I think especially the phase two of storytelling is just next level. There was like a characters. If someone wants to study filmmaking and storytelling specifically, and how to develop a kind of a character arc, Marvel is really good. Harry Potter, I think there's a and you can just see how characters have developed over time. And I always every year, every quarter or so, I tend to rewatch some of them just to
Mhm.
remind me. Recently, I've again finished Harry Potter. See what I mean? You don't watch the whole thing. I skipped through them, but you still go through the moments and refreshes the kind of memory that how like the Lord Voldemort is like the baddest person, but he was an orphan who was not loved before at all. And he thought, okay, if I have to survive in this world, I have to become the baddest person because then no one can touch me. I would not die. The obsession of an orphan with not dying. Isn't that crazy? And then the thing that he put his life into, like the Horcruxes. And then Harry Potter is a Horcrux himself. But Harry had the courage of like, I mean, I'm telling stories again to people who have already seen it millions of times over. But I love the scene, and I sometimes you watch it and I think you don't understand much because it's like kind of a just flowing of a movie, and then you read like analysis of like that scene, like what happened in that one. And I love the part like in last Harry Potter, the Deathly Hallows 8 one, where Harry knew, you hold the sorcerer's stone in your hand. In America, it was called Philosopher's Stone. You hold the stone in your hand, and it will immediately bring back the dead from life. But they are like kind of shadows who are not real, but at the same time, they're not too fake. They're just there. And the supposed job of the stone is to have a conversation with them. But then the drawback of that stone is that it will lead you, the shadows will persuade you in joining them in afterlife if you hold on to that
Yes.
stone too much.
Yes.
So in the movie, they just showed him Harry dropping the stone actually, because he's like, I'm gonna face my death. If I have to, he gets to know that memory that if Lord Voldemort has to die, he has to die. But instead of facing fear and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna create my own set of Horcruxes. I'm never gonna die. He's like, I'm gonna drop the stone. I'm ready to, meet my fate. And I think that development of character is so true that I think in real life we face these kind of changes and chances actually.
Mhm.
And not in terms of Horcruxes and Voldemorts, but they are metaphors for real life. And I think that's why
And they are
even,
metaphors for parts of ourselves.
and I was going to come to that. That's why when you mentioned God, and I think religion has, I don't think so. There's any religion on planet who's like, just let's just start killing people. No, the decencies that's available in religions is not available in any kind of a major institution. There are pluses, and I mean, this is not a religious debate at all, but I think through that storytelling, a lot of it, they were a lot of people take things as exactly as they are, but most of the religious texts are, at least in my opinion, is that they're metaphors for larger things, and they're open to your interpretation of what you need to make out of
That
it.
they can pass through
That they can pass through,
thousands of
yeah.
years, yes.
You don't have to try to run an experiment, design a stick, which when you put in the ground, it will start divergence in water. That's not the point of that story whatsoever. It is that fate that if you decide I'm going to do something, that you can go through, seas and oceans. So I think that's what has really, I don't know who, when, or why, but a lot of effective storytelling has been taken away from us
Yes.
and been replaced by attention seeking quick strolls. I really would love for people to read more fiction. I don't know, Harry Potter, Marvel, whatever, read books. I think growing up, not a lot of people, but there was always this sense of, for me at least, that oh, he's trying to imitate the stories, and no wonder I ended up in the job that I am in because I used to love these things. I just think there is some depth to those things where you can watch a story or a movie and you can just take the best parts of what you learn from it and apply in your own life, and you will be okay. I think there's tons and tons of good out there, but I don't know why we are on the scrolls now. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. In China, there's this new phenomena of called vertical dramas. Um, Barbara, you have to check it out. It's essentially like it's like small 60 to 90-second clips, but they're like 50 or 50 or 70 of them. There's like a whole sketch of, and they're all kind of like erotic stories for the starting off with, but they are kind of making their way over to America. So now Hollywood directors are talking about it. Some are even working on it as well. That they're essentially these apps that you can download and eventually be like, I don't know, billionaire cheats with a girlfriend or whatever. You will watch like five of them, and then the next ones are like paid in cents or 10 cents or whatever. So you end up paying $30, $40 for the whole story. But so the movie makers are like, oh my God, we've cracked another code. Instead of buying the movie for $10 a ticket or $8, or I think the max I've seen on Apple is like maybe $19 or $20. I don't know, it might be wrong. But like for a single movie paying $40, that's insane. But they found this, and I mean, currently the genre started from like this kind of romantic erotic novels and that kind of stuff. So there are a lot of like 15 to 55, 65 like women who are really interested in this genre, but they are now thinking, okay, I mean, that's just that typical genre, that's what this thing is. But they're like, okay, now can we make stories about characters? So they're now jumping into mainstream with all of that. And I'm just thinking, but even then, they were making a distinction that I don't think so. There's going to be an Oppenheimer on that thing. Like you just
Mm,
scroll and it's the next chapter, scroll and it's next chapter.
mhm.
But I'm like, okay, that might be exactly the loss of it. And I think that's why I love where Tom Cruise and all these kind of traditional folks are kind of trying to bring cinema back. I don't think so. I think there's something to it. I read about Oppenheimer in physics when we were studying, but that guy changed the humanity's history like nothing else, like big time.
Yes.
And you can see the struggles, like, oh, he's a communist, or like the, and I think there are scenes where, they're terrible parents, him and his wife. They've given away their children. They're like, I mean, take them. We're not great parents. So there are character flaws in them. But again, you're very right. Like there's some light in them, and then they're like, he makes the weapon, but then he's like, oh my god, this is something terrible I've done,
Yes.
and he spends like the next half of his life working on that. I think there's something to learn from those stories that we can learn. So, that's why I personally think this podcasting as a medium is just super good. I'm doing three of them. Whatever you can do, great, because it's giving our generation and even the generations before us a rekindling of that one-to-one conversation we used to have. Albeit, like there are mics here, there are cameras here, fine, but I'm absolutely cherishing that when in life I'm gonna have sit down from a person like you literally live in California and I'm
Yes.
here in London. It's different, like what, 12 hours, 16 hours of a flight, miles apart. But we're sitting here and I'm learning from you. I think this is great. I
I
think
do
we're,
I do too, Waleed, and even though I have an opportunity to do it virtually,
yes,
it's the same in my clinical practice. People, ask me, "Do you only do virtual?" Because a lot of people only work virtually now, and I say, "No, if you wanna come in, I love the human to human contact,"
yeah,
and it's not that you can't be effective online, we could still have a great conversation online, but there is something different
yeah,
about that, and that is the difference between living, in this shared experience versus living out there in the ethers somewhere.
yeah,
And I think we've just gotten so disconnected, whether it's through this scrolling, we're connecting with something, but then we feel hollow inside
yeah,
and we feel disconnected from people. And it's really nice to be able to just go out and have a cup of tea with someone or to meet at a park and go on a walk or to sit down and have a podcast conversation. That I think we have a shared humanity and we are lacking in it tremendously. We've been pulled so far away from each other and from ourselves. And whether that's been by design or it's happened just through the evolution of how humans have gone about facilitating life, I think that there's a deep call to go back within and to also just offer that humanity to someone else.
Barbara, we have a tradition on the pod. You have to tell me. We talked about a lot of literature, a lot of books, and a lot of movies and videos. What's been the most profound piece that you will want to have the listener to view, read, that you found it very useful for your life?
I think the two highlights that come to mind are, well, three. First, the Bible,
Yes.
because again, whether you want to take it literally, but if you take it more in the stories of what people have gone through and how they have conflicted against each other and how people knew that, where Jesus knew that he would be betrayed and yet he still offered forgiveness and things of that. It's just from that sense of there is so much that is out there for us to remember about ourselves. And so the Bible first of all, but the others would be Man's Search for Meaning
Viktor Frankl. Yeah.
by Viktor Frankl. And again, to reiterate that, it's because for him to not just witness, but to experience what the human soul had to go through during those experiences as their bodies were being tortured or deteriorated, and their minds and their hearts and their families torn apart, and their glasses taken away, and things of that nature, to watch the frailty of humans. And then to be able to recount that in a way that we could not just I love how in his book he only tells the amount of the atrocity that he has to get the point across, but it's not like the Schindler's List where it's the whole movie or the whole book
Yeah.
is that. So it's the poignant amount to lead you into that ethos of life. And then the third is The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And over the course of 40 years, he practiced surrendering. So his first book, I believe it was his first book, was called The Untethered Soul. So he taught how to kind of step outside yourself and witness yourself. This is what he started practicing. And then the surrender experiment was him observing himself for 40 years as there's things that was perhaps his ego saying, "But I want that." And
Mm.
then he'd be observing himself and say, "But if I let life take over, if I let the nature and the course of life take over, where will I end up?" And so he allowed himself to go along that journey, and oh my goodness, it is mind-blowing, it is heart-wrenching, it is such an incredible accounting of his journey and how it's really all of our journey. That how we start down a path and we want it so badly, but we know inside it's not the one for us or it's not working out, but we push for it. And when we finally surrender and say, "Okay, I know that's not where life is taking me," and then we follow that other path, that more divergent path, and then discover where we were actually meant to be and know it within. And if you've not read that book, highly recommend
I'll
it.
take a look at it. I'll definitely take a
Yeah.
read of it. Barbara, last question. What is that one question that you would have hoped someone would have asked you in your life, but no one has ever asked you that question?
What do you really need that would make all the difference in your life?
And what would have been your answer?
Guidance.
I'm going to end on that. Thank you so much for being on the pod. It was an absolutely beautiful conversation, something I'm going to cherish for a very long time.
I always cherish
Uh,
our conversations, Waleed, and I'm so appreciative for you to invite me onto this and to make the time and the space to work out with my
it was my
schedule to
pleasure.
get
Thank you
here.
so much, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you, Waleed.